Silence can sometimes hurt more than betrayal itself. The deepest wound is not always the moment someone lies to you, abandons you, or breaks your trust. It is the moment you realize they can look you in the eye afterward and behave as if nothing ever happened. They smile like life is normal. They laugh with other people. They post happy moments. They continue their routine without showing even the smallest sign that your pain ever existed. No apology arrives. No honest conversation begins. No acknowledgement of the damage they caused. That is the part that keeps many people awake at night. It creates endless questions that replay over and over inside the mind. If they cared, why do they seem perfectly fine? If they loved you, why don't they look affected? If they know they caused pain, why don't they even mention it? Many people spend months, sometimes years, searching for answers, believing there must be one hidden explanation that will finally make everything make sense. What makes this even more confusing is that our minds naturally expect other people to react the same way we would. When we accidentally hurt someone we care about, we usually feel uncomfortable. We think about it. We replay the situation. We wonder if we should apologize. We want to repair the relationship. Because that feels normal to us, we assume everyone experiences guilt in the same way. But psychology tells a very different story. The human mind is far more complicated than most people realize, and not everyone processes responsibility, regret, or emotional pain the same way. Some people confront their mistakes with honesty. Others spend enormous amounts of mental energy convincing themselves they did nothing wrong. The most surprising part is that many of these reactions happen without conscious awareness. The brain has powerful ways of protecting itself from emotional discomfort, even when that protection comes at someone else's expense. That is why two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different memories of what happened. One person remembers the hurt in vivid detail, while the other genuinely believes they were simply defending themselves. This difference is not always caused by cruelty. Sometimes it is caused by psychological defense mechanisms that quietly reshape reality until the truth becomes difficult to recognize, even for the person who caused the damage. That does not erase responsibility, but it explains why certain people can appear calm while someone else is left carrying emotional scars. There is another hidden truth that few people talk about. The person who seems unaffected is not always emotionally stronger. In many cases, they have simply become better at avoiding uncomfortable emotions. Avoidance can look like confidence from the outside. It can look like moving on quickly. It can even look like happiness. But appearances rarely reveal what is happening beneath the surface. The human brain often chooses temporary emotional comfort over painful honesty. Instead of facing guilt, it creates excuses. Instead of accepting responsibility, it shifts blame. Instead of asking for forgiveness, it rewrites the story until forgiveness no longer seems necessary. This process can happen so gradually that people begin believing their own version of events. That is one of the most fascinating discoveries in modern psychology. Memory is not as fixed as we like to think. Every time we remember an event, our mind has the ability to reshape it. Over time, people can slowly edit uncomfortable memories to protect their identity. They remove details that make them look responsible. They magnify details that make them appear justified. Eventually, the story feels completely real to them. This is one reason arguing with someone who refuses accountability often leads nowhere. You are trying to discuss facts while they are defending an identity they cannot afford to question. Understanding this changes everything, because it shifts the question from why don't they care to what is happening inside their mind that allows them to avoid caring in the way I expected. That single shift can free people from years of confusion. It can also explain why waiting for guilt, regret, or an apology often becomes a painful trap. The truth is that closure does not always come from the person who hurt you. Sometimes the greatest understanding comes from learning how the human mind protects itself from shame, even when innocent people pay the emotional price. Throughout this video, you will discover why some people act completely normal after causing deep emotional pain, why guilt affects different personalities in completely different ways, how emotional avoidance quietly changes behavior, why certain defense mechanisms can make people believe their own excuses, and why waiting for someone else's regret may keep you emotionally stuck far longer than necessary. You will also learn why emotional maturity plays a much bigger role than most people realize, and why some individuals simply do not experience relationships with the same emotional depth. Most importantly, you will understand why another person's reaction should never become the measure of your own worth. By the end of this video, many of the questions that have been weighing on your mind may finally begin to make sense, and you may see your own experiences from a completely different perspective. Some of the psychological truths we will uncover are rarely discussed because they challenge common assumptions about guilt, love, accountability, and human behavior. They reveal that what looks simple on the surface often hides a much deeper emotional reality. So stay with us until the very end, because the final lesson may completely change the way you view the people who walked away without looking back, and help you find a kind of clarity that no apology could ever provide. Welcome to our channel, where we explore the hidden psychology behind human behavior, relationships, emotional healing, and the patterns that shape our lives. If you enjoy thoughtful videos that help you understand people on a deeper level and strengthen your emotional awareness, make sure to subscribe and join our growing community, because every video is designed to help you see what most people never notice. Now, let's begin with the first reason why someone can hurt you deeply and still act as though nothing ever happened. One of the biggest mistakes people make after being hurt is believing that the other person must see the situation exactly the way they do. It feels logical to think that if someone caused deep emotional pain, they should recognize it, admit it, and try to make things right. But the human mind does not always choose truth first. Very often it chooses protection. Psychologists describe this as cognitive dissonance. It happens when a person's actions clash with the image they have of themselves. Most people want to believe they are kind, fair, caring, and reasonable. That belief becomes part of their identity. The problem begins when their behavior proves otherwise. If someone lies, betrays, manipulates, or abandons a person they once claimed to love, they are suddenly forced to face two conflicting ideas. One says, "I am a good person." The other says, "I deeply hurt someone." Holding both ideas at the same time creates emotional discomfort that the brain naturally wants to reduce. Instead of changing their behavior or accepting responsibility, many people change the story. They begin searching for explanations that allow them to protect their identity without facing the full weight of what they did. That is why you may hear statements like, "I had no choice, you were too sensitive, you pushed me to this point," or "anyone else would have reacted the same way." These words are often less about explaining reality and more about reducing guilt. They create distance between the person and the emotional consequences of their actions. The interesting part is that many people repeat these explanations so often that they eventually believe them. What may have started as an excuse slowly becomes their personal truth. The brain is remarkably skilled at editing uncomfortable memories. It highlights details that support innocence while quietly fading details that suggest responsibility. This is one reason why two people can describe the same event in completely different ways, and both genuinely believe they are telling the truth. Memory is not like a recording that never changes. It is more like a story that gets rewritten every time it is remembered. Small changes slowly become larger ones until the original event looks very different from how it actually happened. This process protects emotional comfort, but it often leaves the injured person feeling invisible because their experience is no longer recognized. They are left trying to explain a wound that the other person has already erased from their own version of reality. That is why arguments about the past often become exhausting. One person is trying to understand what happened, while the other is trying to defend who they believe they are. Those are completely different goals, and they rarely meet in the middle. This also explains why some people seem unusually calm after causing serious damage. Their peace does not necessarily come from innocence. It can come from convincing themselves that nothing important happened at all. Once the mind accepts a new story, guilt loses much of its power. The person no longer feels responsible because their internal narrative has removed responsibility from the equation. This does not make the pain you experienced any less real. It simply reveals that the human mind can become surprisingly creative when protecting self-esteem. Accepting this truth can be difficult because it means not everyone who hurts you is secretly sitting alone, filled with regret. Some people have already found a way to escape those feelings by changing the meaning of the event inside their own minds. They do not wake up every morning thinking about the damage they caused, because, in their version of the story, they were justified from the beginning. Understanding this is important because it stops you from wasting years trying to prove your pain to someone who has already rewritten history. Their inability to acknowledge your experience does not erase its reality. It only shows how powerful psychological defense mechanisms can become when someone's identity feels threatened. But protecting a positive self-image is only part of the picture. There is another reason people appear untouched after hurting someone, and it has less to do with changing the story and more to do with escaping uncomfortable emotions altogether. Many people never learn how to face guilt in a healthy way. As children, they may have been punished for showing sadness, ignored when they expressed fear, or taught that difficult emotions were signs of weakness. Instead of learning how to process emotional discomfort, they learned how to avoid it. As adults, that pattern quietly follows them into every relationship. The moment guilt appears, they look for the nearest exit. They bury themselves in work. They fill every hour with activity. They spend more time with friends. They begin another relationship before the previous one has emotionally ended. They stay busy, laugh loudly, post happy moments, and convince everyone around them that everything is fine. From the outside, this behavior can look unbelievably cold. It may seem as though they never cared at all. But emotional avoidance is not always the same as emotional peace. Sometimes the busiest person is simply the one running the fastest from feelings they cannot tolerate. Sitting alone with guilt requires emotional maturity. It means admitting that your actions affected another human being. It means accepting that you are capable of causing pain even if you never intend to. That kind of honesty feels frightening to people who have spent years avoiding difficult emotions. So they distract themselves before those emotions have a chance to surface. The problem is that avoidance offers relief, not resolution. Ignoring guilt does not heal it. Avoiding accountability does not erase consequences. It only delays the emotional work that eventually catches up in different ways. Some people become restless. Others become emotionally numb. Some keep repeating the same unhealthy relationship patterns because they never stopped long enough to understand why those patterns existed in the first place. Every distraction feels like progress until another conflict brings the same hidden emotions back to the surface. This cycle can continue for years because avoidance becomes a habit rather than a temporary response. It becomes easier to leave than to repair, easier to replace than to reconnect, and easier to pretend than to reflect. That is why someone who appears perfectly happy after hurting another person may simply be very skilled at escaping uncomfortable feelings rather than resolving them. Yet even emotional avoidance does not fully explain why certain people seem almost untouched by another person's suffering. There is another layer beneath all of this, one that begins much earlier in life and quietly shapes the way some people experience the emotions of others. The biggest lesson to take away from this video is one that can completely change the way you heal after being hurt. One of the greatest mistakes people make is believing they cannot move forward until the person who hurt them finally admits what they did. They wait for an apology. They wait for guilt. They wait for regret. They wait for the other person to suddenly understand the pain they caused. But that moment may never come. Not because your pain was imaginary. Not because your feelings were too sensitive, but because accepting the truth would force that person to question the image they have of themselves. For some people, protecting their identity feels easier than facing reality. That is why no amount of explaining, arguing, or proving your point can create awareness in someone who is not ready to be honest with themselves. Real closure begins when you stop placing your healing in someone else's hands. It begins when you realize that your peace does not need another person's permission. The moment you stop waiting for them to understand is the moment you begin to understand yourself. That is where true freedom starts. When someone hurts you and then acts as though nothing ever happened, your mind naturally searches for answers. It wants to know why they seem unaffected, while you are left carrying the emotional weight. But as we have discovered today, The answer is rarely as simple as believing they never cared. Sometimes they avoid guilt because it feels too painful to face. Sometimes emotional immaturity keeps them from recognizing the damage they caused. Sometimes they create a different version of the story to protect their self-image. And sometimes they have spent so many years hiding from uncomfortable emotions that accountability no longer feels natural to them. None of these explanations excuse harmful behavior, but they can help you stop blaming yourself for someone else's inability to face the truth. Always remember this. Your pain was real even if no one apologized. Your experience mattered even if someone denied it. Your healing does not depend on another person's guilt. It depends on your willingness to stop chasing answers from people who are unwilling or simply unable to give them. The strongest people are not the ones who force others to admit they were wrong. They are the ones who choose peace even when that admission never comes. So let this thought stay with you long after this video ends. The strongest form of closure isn't hearing, "I'm sorry." It's reaching the day when their silence no longer controls your peace, their choices no longer define your worth, and their absence no longer steals your happiness. If this video helped you see your experience from a new perspective, take a moment to support the channel. Click the like button, because it helps this video reach more people who may need these words today. Subscribe to the channel for more deep insights into psychology, relationships, emotional healing, and human behavior. And don't forget to share this video with someone who may still be searching for answers after being hurt. Finally, tell us your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever met someone who acted as if nothing happened after causing deep pain? We'd love to hear your experience. Until next time, keep protecting your peace, keep choosing your growth, and remember that your greatest strength begins the moment you stop giving someone else the power to decide your value.